I'm really excited to be here. I found this group a few years ago, and I'm really grateful to be in community. And I've learned so much from others to get to share some of what I do. And I'm really excited to hear kind of reactions to it and what you're thinking in terms of your own experiences with play. So I wanted to just start with to give you a sense of like who's speaking, what are some of my roles, like what do I do? So I am an associate professor of English at Southern, for those of you in the New Haven area. We're a state school, so we have a diverse range of students. I teach from freshmen up to graduate students, mostly fiction writing, but I also teach an intro to neurodivergent culture course that's brand new, that's really exciting. I'm a neurodivergent writer, so I love writing from that perspective. I'm also a faculty advisor for our student neurodiversity club we have. After I got tenure, I started a faculty staff neurodiversity group, which I co-lead with another colleague. So that's been a lot of fun and just kind of seeing the neurodivergent experience through a lot of different lens and trying to learn how to support one another. I also spend a lot of time outside and a lot of time listening. I see myself as a storyteller, but I also think listening is a really crucial skill when you are a storyteller to be able to hear the other things going on. And as Don said earlier, we all have stories to tell. So even though I'm kind of doing it like at a certain academic level, whatever that means, like it's really important that everyone understands I have a story to tell. I tell my students that when I'm teaching like freshmen, even if you're haunted by like your second grade teacher who said you had bad grammar, like we all have really important stories to tell. And I'm especially interested in what does that mean through a neurodivergent lens, right? Like, how are we telling our stories? What's authentic? So please do feel free. I'm not someone who usually like lectures. My courses are very like discussion based. So if you have like a question in the moment or I'm saying something that like isn't clear, I'm also not sure how to get chat to show up while I'm screen sharing. So I apologize about that. But if there is a question in the moment, maybe I have it here. Um, so if there is a question, please let me know if I'm saying something that is unclear in the moment. All right. So the next slide, just a little bit more background in terms of how I got started writing. When I was in kindergarten, they actually wanted to hold me back because they didn't think my social skills were strong enough. So I actually tell students now, I'm like, you can fail kindergarten and still become a professor. Like that's possible. And I was pulled out for I don't know, speech intervention or whatever they called it at the time, where they'd like take you one on one and try to get you to like talk better, which was generally had the opposite effect for me at least. So the page was a really important place. And even before I started writing, like I was always imagining stories in my head, and it was kind of like a little bit of an escape and a comfort, but also kind of built confidence. And it was also, so I have a picture there. And some of you may have similar memories, when your parents went to take you like school clothes shopping and how overwhelming it was at like Kmart or the mall or wherever they took you in the lights. And I would immediately like sink into story. I would just pretend I was like somewhere else, like at home, doing something else. So this kind of power of imagination was a way of like regulating and grounding. And then the other picture I have there, when I was in high school, and I would always listen to the radio in the morning while eating breakfast. And at the time, they would play the ranking of the top 25 guys teams in basketball and not the women's. And I wrote to them, and I actually got them to then start playing the women's scores, which was like a really powerful thing as someone who had been told, my spoken voice wasn't strong and all these issues with it. Like I wrote a letter and immediately like found action. So I was like, that was pretty cool. That was pretty exciting to me. So some of the reasons I still write, love writing and storytelling, um, finding stillness and silence. Ada Limon, who was our previous poet laureate, I was on a Zoom talk that she did, and she had this really great quote about how we have to have silence to hear ourselves, and how we rarely get that in this world that is just like so crazily fast-paced. Also, full body listening, which is a phrase I stole from one of the OTs I work with that I just think is a beautiful phrase because we're often, or at least I think about my own experiences, I think there were so many moments that I was told like I was too sensitive or you have to wear that shirt or whatever, and I turned off listening. And I think about how can I restore this sense of full body listening. And for me, writing and storytelling is a way of honoring that and rediscovering sensory joy. So authentic experience, processing emotions, reflecting, dreaming, meeting sensory needs. For me, it's a real sense of confidence and pride. And if I write about neurodivergent characters, there's like, a sense of like I'm on the page, right? I'm putting myself on the page, and that's really exciting for me. So I'm gonna start a little bit with like I call this the playscape I grew up in. I think where we grew up like really influences our sense of play and who we are. So I grew up in rural upstate New York. So if you see that green arrow, that is actually my house, like amidst all of these trees, and it was such like a magical wonderland for me. Where I grew up, there was like one public school. Where I'm now like people are like, oh, I went to a different high school, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine that. Like from a social aspect, I think I was lucky because a lot of my friends I knew from like kindergarten to 12th grade, like that's just the way it was there. And as you can see from the pictures, I grew up on a road. Um, Part of it was like state lands. So literally after my house in the winter, they stopped plowing and we would like cross country ski and snowshoe and stuff on the road and sled, which was just like this really magical thing. And that picture is my parents and then me and my sister. I have a twin sister who's also neurodivergent, taking us hiking when we were little. So because we were always outside. Like that's just how our family was. So that's the natural world has influenced my world a lot in the sense of play. So the next one, why am I writing to reclaim playscapes and sensory joy? And part of that is, and I'm guessing people in this audience can connect. There's a lot of tough memories around play. Play is this interesting word, and then it's like, well, we're having fun, but there are also sometimes like these weird requirements around it, right? I don't know if any of you are like me and have very conflicted memories about like birthday parties and what that was like. I remember there was this one birthday party I went to, and I don't remember what I was supposed to be doing. I wasn't doing it, and I ended up finding an earthworm, and I just find earthworms fascinating. Like they have like the five pairs of hearts and everything. And so I found this earthworm, and I was very proud of this earthworm, and promptly went to show the other girls that, we were like 8 or something, who knows? And of course they're all like freaked out by the earthworm. They're like, "What are you doing with this earthworm?" So that's part of it. I think the world we're living in right now is really tough. There's a lot of misinformation about autism out there, and a lot of, intersectionality in terms of if you're also queer. I write neuroqueer characters losing supports. There's a lot of things happening that for me means there's a need to lean into joy. So I love the quote, joy is an act of resistance, right? And to kind of lean into joy right now. And so I put there like some of the questions I think about how can we in stories authentically acknowledge conflict and then move forward with genuine joy, and where do we find unexpected joy? So that's some of the stuff I'm thinking about in my work. Okay. So this is like a little bit of like the nerdy academic slide of like how I break down what I'm doing. Because at Southern we have a high teaching load. It's a 4-4, meaning 4 classes a semester, but you can then like apply to get a course release, which I did for next spring. So this is how I had to like break down what I'm doing. And as I put there at the bottom the asterisks, it's not like I made this up and then wrote a story. I wrote a story that was a lot of fun, and I'm going to share some of that with you. And then I was well, let's figure out what I'm doing so I can like maybe reread that in another story. So the three facets are, and for me, like I'm particularly looking at the intersection of like neurodivergent and queer, like neuroqueer, because there's, as we've talked about in other sessions, there's a lot of overlap there in terms of identity, conflicts experienced by the neuroqueer protagonist in previous moments of play. So like exploring those. Then reimagining play in a new and more supportive manner, accompanied by visceral moments of sensory joy, which is like a really fun part for me. I absolutely love doing that. And then also thinking about communication for number 3, the protagonist's communication with their environment, others, becomes authentically their own, shedding neuronormative rules for conversation. So I'm going to take you through kind of like these three things and how I'm kind of thinking about them. I absolutely love the concept of past selves, and I'm not sure how much y'all in the audience like think about this. To me, this is really important, both like as a human, a writer, like a teacher, how do we stay in touch with past selves? So this is a very opening of a short story called 11 by Sandra Snersos. If you haven't read it, it's beautiful. I love this story. I read this with all of my students because I just think it's really cool. And the story opens with what they don't understand about birthdays and what they never tell you is that when you're 11, you're also 10 and 9 and 8 and 7 and 6 and 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. And the story does such a beautiful job of like bringing up those moments when those other selves like emerge, right? So I'm often thinking about this within my stories. How do we access our past selves in order to find authentic versions of ourselves? Like, I know for me, like, I was for a while, like, such a silly kid. And then, because of certain things that happen, like, you kind of shut that off and you lose that. And then thinking about, like, how do we re-access that, right? That's a really, important part for me. So that's one of the things I think about. Every time we have an experience, it's not just our present self, it's all these past selves inside of us, like having the experience as well. So I have a couple other quotes connected to this because, like I said, I'm just fascinated by the idea of past selves. So this is from a Joan Didion essay. So, she's writing for much older, like having many more past selves than just the character that's 11 in the Cisneros story. And Didion says, I think we are all well advised to keep on nodding terms with the people we used to be, whether we find them attractive company or not. Otherwise, they turn up unannounced and surprise us, come hammering on the mind's door at 4 a.m. of a bad night, and demand to know who deserted them, who betrayed them, who is going to make amends. We forget all too soon the things we thought we could never forget. I have already lost touch with a couple of people I used to be. So that last part I think about a lot. Like, how can I not do that? And I think we all have like selves we're frustrated with too, like past selves, like, oh, I didn't get that yet, or I didn't know that yet. But how can we show them kindness, and honor them? So that's something I think about a lot. And then the last one, I'm not going to read the full poem. I don't know, some of you might have seen this. You can look it up, it's online. But by Emery Hall, I've been 1,000 different women. Make peace with all the women you once were. Lay flowers at their feet. Bless them and let them be. And there's a lot more to that poem. But again, just thinking about past selves and the different past selves that we carry inside of us. So, I'm talking about Albatross Land. And by the way, the story is available free online. It came out in Fourth River in November. So, someone please remind me at the end. I'll put it in the chat in case anyone wants to read it in full. But I'm going to talk a little bit about like how I crafted it and just like the fun of doing this story. It was just a lot of fun to write. So, it's a 15-year-old, neurodivergent queer protagonist. She's working a summer job. And I'm going to get more into the pool and like what's happening with the pool. But there's also this albatross costume character, like someone, they do kids' birthday parties and someone has to dress up as an albatross. And in terms of like the past selves and the experiences with play, she's kind of confronting a little bit a bad pool experience, which I'm going to read just a brief excerpt here. And I did write this in second person. Uh, when you first started working here, all you could think about was that time years ago you jumped into this very shallow end back when it was filled with water instead of balls. Your swimsuit was too old, too thin. You really cannonballed, popped an entire strap, emerged bare-chested. The boys drew pictures of you for the rest of that year. So she's kind of confronting that past experience. There's also this sensory element of it, in terms of like the lights in the pool being really bright and that reminding her of a classroom at times. And there's also, so I won't try to explain all the nuances of the story, but this guy, Skip, he bought this old wing of the school where his wife, Miss Marty, who was a teacher at the school, worked, and she passed away due to cancer. But she studied albatrosses and loved albatrosses, so that's kind of like the tie in there. But the protagonist really loved this teacher. This was a teacher who saw her, and then there are, of course, the current conflicts in terms of, this coworker isn't really nice. So she's juggling different things. She's juggling conflicts both with the past selves and also her current self. All right, so this is my favorite part. This is the reimagining part. So what I did is it's an old school pool. It's been drained and it's been remade into a ball pit. And the reason for this, part of it was like play for me, right? Because as a kid, I kind of I liked ball pits, but I didn't like the usually there was like one exit, right? There was like all the netting and then like one exit, and there'd be like a lot of people sometimes, which is like really overwhelming. And same with pools. I really love water, but you get enough people in there, it just feels like chaos. So I was like, okay, what happens if we drain the pool? There's like no nets, then we just fill it with balls and like let's see what happens, right? Create this giant ball pit into the pool. So that's what I did for the story. And then like the added element, I'm like, let's just go like another step further. I was one of those kids who always wanted to grow up to be an animal. Like there's so many animals I would love to be for a day. So I'm like, she's gonna be in this albatross costume, which has its, it has its tough sensory elements. It's kind of hot and such. But it also helps in terms of like it dims sound a little bit, the lights, protects her a little bit from like touch from other people. And the costume, I'll just say briefly, like the way I invented it in my story. So it's like a pumpkin suit, and then it's a football helmet and a traffic cone to form the beak. Like that's how they built the costume. And then someone painted it the outside to look like an albatross. But the protagonist points out that the dimensions are not scientifically accurate because of the way that the costume was built. So there's kind of some play with that element too. And then what happens, so the way this works at the end of a birthday party, then the albatross always has to jump in the ball pit. And I don't know how much y'all know about albatrosses. They can fly for a really long time, but they're not very good at landing because they don't land very often. So the albatross has to jump into the ball pit. So I've built up to what, in story writing we say is like the climax. And I was like, oh man, this is not gonna go well. But then there was actually like this surprising moment of kind of like sensory bliss that came in. So I'm gonna read like what came out, and it's been refined since then. So again, she's in this costume, she's at the edge of the pool, and I'm going to read this paragraph of what happens. Louis starts rattling off directions, but you don't want this drawn out long. You shuffle toward the edge of the pool. You and Skip lock eye beak contact for a second. You hug your wings to your pumpkin body, cannonball into the balls. You sail for longer than seems possible. Maybe it's all the air in your pumpkin suit. The birthday kid shrieks with an emotion you can't name. Then your pumpkin body skids across the balls. It's a beautiful sensation, your body a sphere rolling against smaller spheres, only round surfaces, like the circles Miss Marty used to draw an albatross. Even your helmet gets in on the action. You're looking up at the lights like you're backstroking. There's one line of light and the rest orange cone like a sunrise. For a second, maybe two, it's just the sound of your body rolling over the balls, your limbs loose, calm. So that's the moment I kind of unexpectedly came to when I was writing and just had a lot of fun with. And there's like some more conflict after that, but just a really cool moment when I was writing. So the third component when I'm working with these stories is this idea of authentic communication and shedding neuronormative kind of rules about like how we should be speaking and communicating. So the cool element of the costume is it limits, spoken speech, and it kind of relieves her the need to kind of speak or to try to speak in that way. And instead, she begins to communicate as she imagines an albatross might through like sounds and motions, which does present some limitations and others not understanding her, but there's this kind of moment with Skip and where he does get it. So that's another thing I like exploring in my stories. And then I just briefly wanted to share, some of the other kind of stories or the other ways I'm looking at play within writing and this idea, particularly of merging the human and the more than human world. Another story I had came out recently called All Jules Wants is a Peloton, and it takes place on a lot of it on a bike. I don't drive, but I really love biking. I love the sensation of it. I love moving through the natural world. I'm just going to read one quick paragraph from it and how she uses biking as kind of a way of imagining the world differently or how it leads to kind of thinking of new ideas. The thing about biking is when she's going fast enough, the world around her blurs. She can only see right in front of her. It's like being in a tunnel, and she can imagine those tunnel walls as anything she wants. Rewrite the world. Craft it into a space where the lights aren't as bright and the sounds aren't as loud, and people talk to each other like they really care. In a world like that, Ashley's ice cream would have rocking chairs and weighted blankets and plant music and a shit ton of plants. Jules doesn't understand when no one's opened an ice cream arboretum or botanical garden. Who wouldn't want to eat a sweet treat while surrounded by the awesomeness of plants? So another piece I'm working on that's still in drafting stage is like a roller rink story. I don't know if any of you, I'm in my early 40s. I don't know if any of you also were at the age of like roller rink birthday parties and what those were like. And it's funny, I really like spinning and the motion of movement, but my coordination was always so poor and there's so many different like sensory things at roller rinks. But I was like, I want another chance to go back there in a story and see if I can make it more joyful. And I think one way of doing that is kind of thinking about it like as a murmuration of birds and like other sensory components. So that's another thing I'm just kind of like having a little bit of fun with right now. Okay. So another thing, and again, I'm like a word nerd as an English major, but I felt like I couldn't have this conversation without talking about just kind of sound and the play of words. Like you might have noticed in the ball pit excerpt, I had a lot of the S sounds because they're really smooth and it kind of mimics like the rolling sound. So I like to play with sound that way. There's so many writers that have influenced me. I don't know if anyone's heard of Jerome Ellis, who has a stutter and just uses it in beautiful ways in terms of creating pauses. They're a musician, a poet, performer, and I do just want to read one sentence from their website that I think captures what they do so beautifully. Through music, performance, writing, video, and photographer, Ellis asks what stuttering can teach us about listening, generosity, and justice. And they really experiment with the pause, which I'm trying to do more often as neurodivergent individuals. We wish there were more pauses, more moments to kind of reflect and such. So I'm really influenced by other writers kind of experimenting with that element. So these are just some examples. I do a lot of like what if asking to get to my stories and like what I want to craft. So the one I'm working on right now, what if there were a comfortable way to attend a birthday party at a roller rink? What if there were a new way to approach conflict? A lot of my stories come from this question. What if my imagination could be a source of sensory joy when I can't find it elsewhere? And what if my imagining and story writing led to new ideas for approaching sensory terrain in my concrete life? And I find it does build a sense of like confidence and creativity that makes me go like, okay, what about this? Let's try this. So some of the benefits I found, and a lot of these you've probably heard before, but there's definitely a relief in releasing a moment on the page and getting it down. Sometimes it takes a while before we can write about certain things. I've had this talk with my students. Some things you can write about just right after it happens. Sometimes it takes like years to kind of get it down, but that idea of really releasing a moment on the page. can also be a way of problem solving, of re-seeing something in a new way. I get so immersed in the story worlds, and it's interesting. And some of you may have had this experience, or even in different mediums than writing, but like a character taking your hand and saying, "Here's a path forward. Here's a new strategy. Here's something new to try." Like I said, this idea of merging past selves and present selves, exploring layers of ourselves. I find I learned so much about myself through like storytelling and writing. I'm always uncovering new things, helping us to imagine a better future, right? Like writing it into existence. Like, what do we want the world to look like? What do we wish exist? And certainly that last point, I mean, that's what I feel like as a writer I'm continually doing is filling the missing spots on the library shelves. What are the stories I reached for at certain moments and didn't have, and how can I write those, and what do those look like on the page? So, for those of you who like prompts, I just have a lot of questions at the end, like specific things you can think about. And these are some of the ones I use for some of my stories. What was an uncomfortable moment of play? How might you rewrite it and discover joy? What is a sensory experience you wish were more readily accessible? And can you make it more accessible through a story, experimenting with that? What are your favorite sensory experiences? Can you access them at times from your imagination? And of course, I'm not saying our imagination like we should have real world experiences too, but as someone who like I'm using my imagination a lot, I'm like that's a source to tap, right? Like that's a source we can definitely use. What are stories that might bring past selves and current selves into contact? Honoring past selves and showing them kindness and maybe at times forgiveness or just understanding. And then how might you find authentic communication through storytelling? So again, different things to think about. That kind of brings me to the last thing I said. Like I said, one of the powers I think of these talks is just kind of sharing and stuff. So I wanted to make sure there's a lot of time for people to kind of contribute and get their voices in. And like I said, my voice does not have a lot of power today. So again, it's really great to kind of be in the space, and I'm curious to hear what you all have to say, whether that's questions or any of these like possible jumping off points. But I'm just really curious to hear kind of your experiences with finding joy, storytelling, past selves. So I'm going to stop sharing now so I can see you all better. There we go.
That's fantastic. I love how our culture is using writing specifically to decolonize our minds. So you were saying it doesn't matter what happened in second grade or whatever. It really doesn't, because none of those rules apply to us. And I love the freedom that people are gaining through just authenticating their own voice and decolonizing their minds and their creativity. And I also think it's really interesting. This has come up a lot synchronicitously, which isn't surprising for this group, but talking to past and future versions of yourself. Um, some of us have experienced that, like in concrete life, in really strange circumstances, like different timelines weaving together. Um, but even if you don't have that sense of being able to reach back and comfort yourself, um, I think that gets really meta, because I think we feel that like already in our past, the way that we made it this far was having that kind of come from the future, if that makes sense. And I love doing that in writing. So, yeah. So, anybody who wants to contribute, again, if you want something read from the chat, please put read at the beginning, because I don't want to read anything out loud people are private about. If you want to just jump in speaking, you can wave in the frame or raise your hand with the icon. Yeah, so I'll turn it over to everyone.
See, for you, I saw an actual hand and then digital hand.
Yes, if you don't mind. Oh, yeah, I'm not looking at the camera. Let me move this. I got two monitors, so I was looking at the wrong screen. So, I have more of a general writing question, but since it's about writing, it applies to all this. So, one issue that I face a lot, and from what I hear, everyone faces when they start out is often when you want to just sit down and write something, I often have trouble coming up with an idea where I have a clear vision of what I want this story's beginning, middle, and end to be, and where I want to go with that. And as a result, as I pursue that story, it becomes nebulous, and eventually I get lost and lose it entirely. So, do you have any advice as far as coming up with ideas and, more importantly, following through with them?
Yeah, those are really great questions. And the first thing I'll say that may not be super helpful, but it's like every writer's different, right? So like my process compared to someone else's. So you kind of had a two-part question there, like coming up with ideas and then
Sorry, I didn't mean to overdo it.
no, 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 that's okay. I was just trying to address both parts of it, coming up with question or ideas, and then following them through. And I tend to more have the problem of like too many ideas and like picking one. So I always say like whatever's like most urgent, right? To try to find something that's like very immediate and urgent to you. And then regarding your question, like beginning, middle, and end. And I do know some writers, like one of the professors I had in undergrad who said like she had to know the ending to a story before she wrote it. I generally do not, right? That's part of the act of discovery for me and the joy of it. What I usually start with, like, I know what the character wants, right? Like I'm following some kind of desire within the story, and then I'm just seeing where it goes. You know, I was teaching in my class the other day, there's this beautiful quote of, I know I'm blanking on the writer who said it, but thinking of writing like driving at night, you can only see as far as the headlights. So you're just focused on what's immediately in front of you. And that's a very hard thing as humans because we don't like uncertainty. But if you can sit in your story in that way and just tell like the scene that's right in front of you, just be immediately focused on that, immersed in the moment, and kind of trust that if you keep following that, you might get to the end. That's how I work as a writer. And we say in the writing world there are, you know, outliners and there are pantsers. So like I write by the seat of my pants, like I'm discovering as I go. But it might be that you're someone who prefers outlining and you like to have a sense of where it's going. From friends I have that are outliners, I will say one of the dangers if you outline too much, the story then becomes less exciting to write because you already know too many of the details of it. But again, it really depends on the writer. But if you're overwhelmed with like, oh my gosh, beginning, middle, and end, I would recommend trying that kind of like thinking about it, like driving at night and just like following what's immediately in front of you, and see if that helps. Yeah, and I see put in the chat. I write with
Thank you.
expected outcome, which is helpful. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a great question. Yeah.
So I have two questions. One question is related to I have the honor of sitting at the table every day with neurodivergent learners, and writing is something that, of course, I encourage. And one of my students turned 13. She, on her own initiative, she is like this. She's gonna rule something. I don't know what she's gonna. She's gonna CEO something. She is a powerful, brilliant, autistic young lady, but she turned 13, and on her own initiative, she did a PowerPoint slide about her life at 13. Like, I mean, broke it down from at age 2, I said my first words, and I was like, wow. So, my question is, what is a way that I can encourage my other students to do this without them feeling like they have to do it, right? Because I don't want it to be mandated, but I'd love for them to be able to explore that. My second question is, and I think it's a question, or maybe it's a different kind of question. So, what I have in my experience, I have recognized that my autistic female learners in between 12 and 16, they tend to write a lot of fiction that's very what their parents would call dark, right? And I always say Stephen King is making a living off of writing dark. So is that something that you have experienced? Is there anything that you can give me insight into that, or is there, and also are there any resources you can guide me to so that I can help my learners become the writers that I know that they want to be? And I'm going to mute myself now and listen.
Okay. Okay, that was a lot of questions. So you'll have to remind me if I didn't if I didn't remember all of them. But I'm gonna
Just do
start
the one, it's fine.
okay, I'm gonna start with the last one because that's one most like this concern about like students writing too dark, right? Which is funny because I remember I'm at the age now where I don't have any grandparents still alive, but for a while my mom would send my grandma all of my published works, and she became concerned that I was writing stories that were too dark, even though she would read a lot of dark books. So I think it's very human. I think stories are a way of kind of exploring some of those like lower thoughts or like kind of dark thoughts. So I don't, and I think I can't remember if you said the concern was like parents or whatever it may be, but I would say, what I often say to like, someone else is, and I will sometimes get concerned with about students and like talk with them depending on subject matter, but I also think it's a really healthy outlet for expressing feelings that may not come out in spoken form, and then they're out there, and that becomes a way of like acknowledging them and talking about them. So that might be something worth, approaching with parents of like, hey, well, there are these kind of like thoughts or a way of just expressing fear around the world or whatever it might be, because there's just like so much happening around everything right now. I don't, I've lost track of your other questions at this
No, 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 that was very helpful. I appreciate that because I do think that framing it in the lines of they're expressing themselves because parents do get alerted. Like, the psychologist gets called in and I'm like, whoa, 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 they're just creative writing. We're not, turning into serial killers. But that's what they tend to think, right? Anything dark. So I do appreciate that insight. And the other one was just if there's any resources, and I'm going to let someone else have a turn, but this is very insightful. Thank you.
And do you mean like resources in terms of like writing or?
Um, Maybe guidance on. I am not a writing instructor, so I'm always trying to make sure that I have information and insight to guide my learners in a way that is neuroaffirming but also beneficial to them. So I'm always looking for anything. I will do a little research on your social media and see if there's anything that would be helpful, though. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and the biggest thing I always say, like for writers at any level, is like read, right, and see what's out there, and just kind of learning what's out there because there are craft texts and stuff. And I was your question because I think you said you worked with like, or at least one of your students was like 13, and that made me think about. I was like, are there good craft texts for like middle schoolers, right? Because I'm teaching college students, but I think the biggest thing is like reading and giving them space to like share their stories. Because it's interesting in my classes, and particularly, I teach all different levels, freshmen through grad students, and we often start, particularly at the earlier levels in college with reading published pieces, and then we get into workshop and they're reading like each other's pieces and how that makes it different, right? To read each other's stories and the way they get into that is really exciting.
Thank you.
And I see something in the chat that says read please,
Yeah,
so I'm gonna go
thanks.
ahead or did you want to read it, Dawn, or do you want me to?
Oh, no, go right ahead. I just was going to jump in and
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So it says, this is also powerful. Years ago, I wrote a story based on myself at kindergarten age. I dusted it off and revisited it a few years ago and realized quickly that the child I was writing about myself is clearly autistic. It got the wheels turning for me to pursue a diagnosis. Sorry I would have spoken, but my throat is really sore today. I connect. It's cold season, right? But thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. And I think our old journals are like a powerful way of revisiting past selves. I go back and read some of mine, and it's kind of it's hilarious and sweet and also sad at sometimes too, but that's wonderful. Yeah.
Before I forget, way up in the chat earlier, someone was asking if you would be willing to share your PowerPoint.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that's fine. I can do that. Yeah.
if there's a link to it, you can put it in the chat or whatever.
Okay. I don't have a link right now. I'm not that, maybe afterwards I can get it to like Roger or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we often actually post things under the advertisements for the talk on social
Okay.
media. We'll have additional discussions and whatever material like that. So that's
Okay.
fine. Thanks. Also, to question, uh, I wrote in the chat, write what you know, dark.
Hmm.
Like a lot of us go through a lot of shit. It's
Yeah.
dark. It's got to go somewhere, and that's always healthy. And I said I find it really offensive when people tell me that I
Hmm.
shouldn't write dark things like throughout my life, because it's exactly like being told to smile more.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a dominating sort of colonizing demand to make of someone. Okay.
It's based on religion. Religion, religion, making everything dark. I'm just going to keep repeating that because I'm just tired of that. Sorry, I did not know I was off mute. Off mute. Now you're muted. Rachel, can I ask another question if we have time? Yeah. In regards to the writing, um, do you? What are your thoughts around um, writing stories, but not motor writing or type writing because of motor planning difficulties, and just verbalizing and editing after? Like,
So you mean kind of like sharing aloud?
so, um, I think for my children, my students who have motor planning and typing is difficult, but they're very verbally proficient in sharing. So I just say you can talk it into the Google Doc and then edit your writing. And so sometimes so I'm not a writer per se, like a teacher. So I'm asking in terms of I consider that to still be writing, just because the motor planning is not involved. So I wanted to know a little of your thoughts on that in terms of developing writers and telling stories. And maybe I don't have a question on that.
Yeah, no, no, I think that's wonderful. I do have students with different kind of like physical disabilities, like a student whose hands like shake so much it's really hard to type, and he uses like the speech to text. So I think absolutely like using some kind of system where like yeah, you're speaking it aloud and writing it down, and then I think like everything. Often there's, and not that I want to like force this on anyone, but like those of us who kind of like keep working, like there's a revising process, right? And you can do that. It looks differently through like text to speech, but like still like sharing with people and such. And um, yeah, your question about process is great because it remind me of like another part of kind of my own process is like movement is so essential for me. And like if I get stuck in a story, often I will go on like a bike ride or like a hike or something. In fact, there's different stories that I've written, and I can still remember like I lived in Missouri before I got the job here in Connecticut, and there's one story I was writing that went on to get published, but I got stuck, and I still remember exactly where I was like biking on the Katy Trail when it just like opened for me, like here's where like the story needs to go. So it's a reminder everyone's process is different, including as you're staying how we transcribe it down. For some of us, that looks like typing. For some of us, that's literally like saying it aloud. I have a lot of students who use like the like notes function in their phones and like they record like voice memos and then like piece them together for like stories. So it's just so I think there are just so many ways of gathering our stories and then like putting them together as a story and then like revising them. That I think, yeah, your question's a great one, a reminder of like you don't have to write a story to be a storyteller. I mean, stories were like oral before they were ever written down, right? It's such a It's such a wonderful thing that we can tell them in different ways. And I think it's really important that students know that because so many people are scared of like the act of writing, and you can be a storyteller without writing anything down if you don't want to. Like, not a requirement to be a storyteller. Yeah.
Gracias.
Mhm.
You had would you be able to share the slide you had up with the final questions, Rachel?
Mhm. Yeah, I could do that.
Those are some great questions, and I personally get overwhelmed if there's more than one at a time.
For sure. Yeah.
So maybe people could see those and maybe pick one that they'd like to talk about or something.
Hmm. Yeah.
Hi, I just want to make a comment in regards to what you said about someone doing their life story on PowerPoint. And I thought that if you had everyone do it not for grading, that would really pressure. That's just what I wanted to say. I don't know if it applies. Yeah, I like that. I have my school is no boxes, no grades. We don't do any of that, so that definitely works.
There's somebody that wanted a read aloud in the chat, so let me grab that.
Okay.
The neurodivergent culture course you mentioned sounded really great. Do you want to talk more about what you learn, read, and do there?
Oh yeah, sure. So, and I will say, it's a brand new course that I designed. We have a new critical disability studies minor at Southern. So there are things I want to change for the second time, but I ran it for the first time in the fall. It's a course for we have what's called living learning communities. So it's all incoming freshmen. So they're also just like learning what it's like to be a college student. But I wanted to give them a lot of different forms of media. So we read like blogs, short articles. We did short videos, like if anyone's seen like Pixar's Loop, with like the canoeing. We looked at that. They did a lot of like reflections in terms of thinking about different elements we were looking at from like Nick Walker's neurodivergent terms into like different kinds of being neurodivergent. And I wanted to make the assignments as practical as possible. The midterm one was a sensory guide, so they had to pick a space on campus, and then I said, you get one sheet. What do people need to know about this? Like, imagine it as like a one sheet sign before people walk into a space. Like, what are the sensory elements they most need to know in terms of just, lighting, sound, social expectations, that sort of thing, so they could examine that through like a neurodivergent lens before entering. And then their final project was to create a neurodivergent either artifact or resource. The large number of students in the class were neurodivergent, but not all of them. It was not a requirement to be in the class. So in short, it was a lot of different like short reading, short videos, mostly neurodivergent voices. That was really important, including non-spoken people who communicate in ways other than speaking aloud. There are definitely things I want to go back and change for the second time, but it was a really exciting first run as well.
Something I've really been enjoying as a writer to the point where I actually took my last book project and I'm just doing it all over again is embracing synesthesia. Like
Mm,
if I see a sound, I don't try to translate that. I'm just
mhm.
talking about that as a sensory experience as any character would. I write nonfiction, but essentially, myself being the main character, I guess.
Yeah.
I talk about those experiences without fear or shame anymore, and that's very liberating.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I found that's one of the things writing has done for me. There's just a sense of freedom, and not feeling shame and just saying it as it is, right? And honoring the experience. So I love that. Yeah.
I grew up very much like you, Rachel. I was in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness of Montana. Like it was
Oh,
an
wow.
hour away by bad road to get to the first hospital. And
Yeah.
we routinely hiked over, like through the pass and over the mountains, so that if something happened to you, you would probably die. Like there wasn't any helicopter service, or,
Hmm.
you know. And I remember going out like on one of those overnight hiking things, where the oldest person in our group was 16 years old. Like I'm so glad I had those experiences.
Yeah.
I look back now and think about what could have happened, but how
Hmm.
liberating that is. Like you've been there. You can't just run to the store. You can't
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
drive drive to get some medicine. Um, being in a place where it's a form of quiet, really,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
how lucky we were to have that growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Like you said, yeah, very. Very magical. And I've had similar experiences like you where I look back and like, wow, we were so far out. We weren't quite as, it wasn't quite an hour to the hospital. We were a little closer, but still like a similar thing. And we also lived where I was at like a quarter mile driveway. So when it snowed, my dad would plow it in the winter. But I remember one time his plow broke and school was out. There was a snow day, but my mom had to get to work. So we were literally shoveling like two paths equidist like for the my mom's tires to get through to get into town because it was a big adventure to just yeah go into town for something. It took a while to get there. Yeah.
Another aspect of that is that you have a different relationship with your family. Like my sister was born 4 years later than me, but we think of ourselves as twins. Like we
Mm-hmm.
did not fight growing up because we depended on each other for survival. And we
Mm-hmm.
were each other's like playmates and confidants. And, you know, we had each other, which is that's really rare these days as well. And also my parents, that depending on them in a completely different way on a different level, and knowing how close we were constantly to a survival situation, potential
Mm-hmm.
dangers. Or, my one of my jobs was to when I was like 12 was to chop wood for the stove.
Yeah.
And I was using an axe that was bigger than me.
Yeah.
I could have
Yeah.
cut my arm off or cut my leg off. And
Hmm.
it's just, but it's immediate like that. And that's I
Hmm.
think really essential about to writing, no matter what your life is, to have that immediacy of of survival in some
Hmm.
way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's funny you mentioned chopping wood with an axe. My dad, yeah, he'd get like the huge cords of wood and have to like split it for winter because we also heated by wood stove. He would not let us use the axe though. We were responsible for like stacking all the wood and such and other chores, but he wouldn't let us, yeah, he wouldn't let us actually split it.
Well, we're coming up on the hour, and I want to make sure that anyone who hasn't had a chance to ask a question can do that if they feel so moved.
I'm just reading the chat. Yeah, we chopped wood too. That's great.
So is there a way people can keep up on your work? Is that something you'd be willing to share here? Your
Yeah,
email or
you
your
can find me on LinkedIn. Oh, and I just forgot. Let me put in so this is the story I mentioned if you want to read it, the one where the pool has been drained and turned into a ball pit and the character's in an albatross um costume. You can I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. I can also put in I'll put in my Southern email. If anyone wants to reach out to me, feel free.
That's great. This has really been fascinating. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks so much. Here I am trying to multitask. Here we go. For someone writing a lot, journaling a lot of small, short scenes, but not stories, with a start, end, and finish, do you have any suggestions on how to find a form for that?
Oh, yeah. That's a great question. I mean, the first thing I'll say is, and I don't know if you're like looking to publish or what you're looking for, but there are so many like micro journals now and stuff where it's not a full story. Like it's just like this quick moment. So the first thing I just want to say is validate like what you're doing, like just these quick scenes because so many people want that. And I think that's also just a really great way of like honoring like I'm just gonna capture this moment. So that's awesome. You do you, but I will answer your questions, suggestions for how to find a form. So I'm guessing you're maybe thinking about like you want to write something longer. Is that correct? Like something maybe like fuller or
Yes, or just something that is presentable in some way, like, to be experienced.
okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, one thing you might think about, like if you have a lot of these different short things, like could you put them together in a way that's kind of like building something? And I'm always so bad in the spot and like remembering like titles of things and stuff, but there are a lot of published things that are like literally like these fragments that put together in a way where the different fragments are like speaking to one another in a really powerful way, which it kind of sounds like you have a lot of like these little pieces. So again, like there's so many different ways of telling stories, and sometimes it is like Amy Hempel's one writer I'm thinking of who's like a minimalist. And it's a lot of like these short sections. So it might be a matter of putting that together. I mean, another thing you could think about is you could go back to those short pieces you have and then think about like, is there one of these I want to expand? Like I want to sit in this moment longer or kind of go into it deeper and see what comes out of it. Sometimes I have just like a draft folder like that and I'm like, ooh, I want to go back to this one and now like kind of explore, this scene a little bit further and that sort of thing. So those are a couple ideas. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it's just nice to hear it aloud. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's a great question. Yeah.
Someone wrote flash nonfiction in the chat.
Yes.
That's great. I like that.
That's a huge thing right now. And one journal I recommend I haven't gotten into yet, but they're like on my list. Brevity. It's all flash nonfiction, creative nonfiction, 750 words or less. You can read them free online and just really great pieces. But there's so many flash nonfiction journals right now that want pieces. So there's so many things out there. There are like 6-word stories, or people who want um, um, I'm blanking on the journal, but they have River Teeth. They have a beautiful things column that's 250 words or less. That's all nonfiction. So there are really a lot of outlets. Like if you want to get it out there, I'm looking for really short nonfiction, which is really exciting.
A couple things. Roger just put a friendly reminder in the chat that includes links to our social media platforms. So go ahead and avail yourselves of that information. And asked, who is the writer you just said you like that is a minimalist?
Oh, Amy Hempel. And there are other ones too I'm blanking on, but Amy Hempel really influenced me, especially when I was a grad student. She has some really great stuff.
Great. Anybody else? Oh, how do you spell
I'm
Amy's
putting it
last
in the
name?
chat. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Great. Thanks so much. Anyone else? I don't want to rush anyone. If you've needed time to process, we'll listen to what you have to share. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. This was great. As I said, this is obviously one of my sweet spots. Love to hear from other writers, but I really think it's great the way that you made it accessible to everyone's experience, whether they're writers or not. So thank you for everyone participating.
Yes.
Go to our social media and look under our events tabs. There's lots of great sessions coming up. Sam Farmer's coming on Friday. He's always such a great presenter, and yeah, other events coming up all the way into the late spring already. We've got things lined up, so get those on your calendar and try to register so we can make sure that you get the information to get in at the last minute for safety protocol. And yeah, everybody just have a great day. Thank you so much.
Yeah, grateful to be here to be in this space with y'all. Thank you for your great questions. Yeah.